Welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast. F1 content around the globe.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast, episode 16. And today I have with me another English F1 YouTuber. The name of the channel is The Mobile Chicane. I discovered him because he did a collaboration with Peter Brook. And Peter Brook is somebody that I collaborated with before. Their styles are pretty much the same. They both have these really long documentary style videos with lots and lots of information, deep dives into the matter of older F1 stories. And we're pretty lucky because the Mobile Chicane was a faceless YouTube channel. But since last week, he has revealed his face. And I think I'm the first podcast to have him on with his face. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mobile Chicane.
Hi Wimbo, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for making time for my small channel. How's it going? Are you working on something big at the minute, or?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I've been working on the next video today, and also preemptively then working on the one after that as well. That's just kind of the way my brain tends to work with these sort of things, is having lots of things on the go at the same time. It keeps it fresh for me and stops me getting stuck on one thing and having to restart from the beginning as soon as I finish the next video. So yeah, I think the next video is a lot closer to being recorded than I initially thought it would be. I think it's pretty much done. It just needs a couple of tweaks on it. But yeah, looking forward to obviously just keep making, like you say, those deep dive, longer style content for the channel. Yeah,
and that brings me to the first question. How did you fall in love with the sport? Where did it start?
So it comes from my dad originally, and he was really big into Formula One in his youth, and I think it did kind of peter off for him when I was born, and my younger sister as well. He didn't have as much time to watch the races, and it was kind of less interesting to him. Some of my very vague kind of early memories of him watching the Grand Prix on the Sunday. We grew up in a very, what I call anti-Schumacher household because, spoiler alert, I grew up in Great Britain. So, there was the whole Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher kind of rivalry there, and all the events that kind of happened in 1994 in Adelaide, and then you had Jerez a few years later as well with Villeneuve. I think Dad always kind of said that Schumacher was just a big old cheat sort of thing against all those kind of morals. So it was basically you supported anyone that wasn't Michael Schumacher. And I do have a very early memory of me and my sister cheering on, quote unquote, the red car to win the race that he was in that day, just because we knew it would annoy our dad because that's the one he didn't want to win. So it was through him that I kind of got into it. And I couldn't tell you the exact point where I was like, yes, I want to get into Formula One. I know that my first season that I started watching was 2004. And again, could not tell you the reason why. I just decided that's the year I was going to start watching it. I think it deserves an enormous amount of credit for sitting through what was an absolute domination of a year for a Michael Schumacher, and still deciding, this is the thing I want to dedicate, spending my Sundays doing is watching this sport. I think one of the big key things I had, and I have it to hand here, is I had this book, but I don't know if this is my book, it may be my dad's. If my dad's watching, sorry Dad, I have this now. I have this tiny little book, and all it is just a very simple, basic kind of biography sort of thing of kind of all these championship years going on in it. And I used to read this at night time like it was Prisoner of Azkaban or something like that. I would sit and read, and that's how I learned about all these great names from history like Fangio and Clark and Senna and Lauda and all these other sorts of people. So that's how I kind of got into the lore and the history of the sport. I think that's what's, from day one, that's always interested me, is learning about all those great names and the stories that we've had throughout history. And from that, it's then kind of expanded to all the numbers, the crunchy data and statistics and like that as well. And it's all, just kind of spiraled from there, really. And now it's just, it's kind of my job to talk about these things, which is very strange from those kind of humble beginnings. But yeah.
So you say it's your job. Like, is it your full-time job now? Your channel, or?
No, not full time, unfortunately. So the way I work at it is, I guess, more of a part-time job is the easiest way of describing it. So I spend Tuesday to Thursdays working on the mobile chicane. So that's whether that's researching, writing, editing, all that sort of stuff. And then Fridays and Saturdays I work another job. I work in a pub, just as a way of just getting in that bit of extra money just to pay the bills, because there's a cost of living crisis going on, and unfortunately just making silly videos with Simpsons memes in them on the internet doesn't pay all your bills. And I'm an adult, I have things to save for, like I'd like to own a house and I'd like to get married and all those sort of things. So the dream is for one day, absolutely, the mobile chicane to be full-time, Monday to Friday kind of job, but not in that position yet. But I'm still very lucky to be in a position where I can even rely on it just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves,
yeah.
Because I want to know the start of the mobile chicane.
So I think it's been something in my mind. It was something in my mind for a very long time. And I think if you're clever enough to kind of look through when things are registered online, you could probably find stuff going back to about 2011, when I first started kind of putting down the mobile chicane in place of things like Twitter handles or Facebook pages or something like that as well. Because I do recall I was at university at the time. I was like, this is something I want to do. I'd like to make a channel, and I'm going to call it the Mobile Chicane. Like, even then I decided that's what the name was going to be. And even then I decided that the first video was going to be the one that would become the first video on the channel, which was the one about Sebastian Loeb transitioning from rallying into Formula One. But I was at university. I didn't have the time or the resources or close to the knowledge, and I don't think I really knew what I wanted it to be then. Was it going to be a blog or a podcast, or was it going to be like the YouTube channel that it is now? So that changed over time, and then 2016, I think, is when I actually registered the YouTube channel. I think I was in between jobs at the time. I was like, I'll do this YouTube channel that I always meant to, and then it just never really happened. When it actually started was bizarrely thanks to COVID and the lockdown that we had. We were all stuck at home and needed things to do. And I think I was browsing the internet as everyone was doing at that time, and I watched a Chain Bear F1 video, and I thought, I could do that. Like, I've always wanted to do that. Why don't I do? I've got so much time in the world to be doing that now. So let's go on and do that and see what happens. So that's how I spent my first lockdown, was making that first video. And I published it, and it got, 10, 15 views or whatever it was, mostly probably from friends and family. And that was it, and I was proud of that because it was something I'd wanted to do, and I did it. From there, then we had more lockdown, and I went, okay, well, I guess I'll just make another video. And so I made that, the Luca Badoa and Ferrari video. And then that exploded, and to this day I still don't know quite how it happened, but something in the algorithm just kind of went, oh yeah, we like that, and threw it out everywhere. And I remember being so frustrated in a way, because while it was great to have kind of all that attention on you, I was still so early on in my journey, so the audio quality is really bad, the editing skills are not great either, and obviously I had nothing else to go on the channel at the time, so there wasn't really anything else to keep people intrigued and keep people watching. So frustrating, but it showed to me that people do generally are interested to click on and look at what I'm doing, and that kind of sparked the idea of actually maybe then let's start turning to this as a real kind of serious something, rather than just a hobby. It could be genuinely something else. So yeah, that's kind of where it all really started.
Yeah. I hear a lot of YouTubers that started during COVID because of the time.
Yeah.
And there was definitely a big opportunity then, because a lot of people were on the platform, and content creators had a lot of time. I started years after COVID, but I wasn't so lucky to have a straight on viral video, but in a sense I'm glad that it's a more gradual thing. as what you're saying, like I would have hated one of my bad videos from a year and a half ago to have gone viral. I'd rather have one of my newest ones go all over the place.
Yeah.
Let me see what the next topic is.
Yeah, I don't want to sound ungrateful for it. Obviously, I know there's a lot of people out there who'd love to kind of have that fall into their lap as well. So it's not me being ungrateful. Obviously, it's kind of springboarding me towards this situation. It was more the fact that it was kind of, like I say, in those early days when I didn't have the best content to show, whereas now I feel like it's with that. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, but I totally get that, because if you have so many eyeballs on it, then you want it to represent what the mobile chicane is, and a video, with a bad microphone and not performed in a way that you would do it now. You don't want that to be representing you. But then again, you get away with a lot on YouTube, especially if people know it's an old video. So we talked about your father being a Michael Schumacher hater.
Yeah.
So who do you hate? No, who do you like and who do you dislike?
So I
like in history, because we'll talk about current F1 later.
Of course. So in terms of who I support, who my favourites are, I am a Williams fan. I'd love to say that you picked your shirt knowing that was going to happen anyway. I've been a Williams fan, and again, could not tell you the reason why. I think there's a couple of theories that float around in my head. One is that when I was at school, one of my best friends at the time was a McLaren fan, and I thought, I'll be a direct rival to you with the kind of that opposite British success team, and I'll be Williams and you'll be McLaren. So maybe that's where it started. When I first started watching, like I say, in 2004, Jenson Button, he was my favourite driver, which, understandable from a Brit's perspective. It was, even despite the Schumacher domination, that was Button's breakout year, and he was kind of routinely on the podium, and he came quite close to winning in that season in the BAR as well. And that same season, it was kind of sort of heavily linked that he was going to go to Williams, and that was a kind of will they, won't they saga for the next 2 years. And I think part of me was kind of like, Button's going to Williams, so I should support Williams, because they were definitely a lot more interesting compared to something like a BAR, which didn't have that kind of same prestige or kind of excitement around it. So, yes, been a Williams fan since, I think, 2005, 2006 is probably when I would say I definitively said these are the people I'm supporting. For all the good that it's done me, I've seen one win, obviously, for Spain 2012 at that time, and then it's doing kind of a slow decline from championship contenders to winners to, the lowlights of 2020 and 2021 as well. A lot of people do ask me about favourite drivers, especially people with a more casual interest in the sport who kind of gotten into it through Drive to Survive and things like that as well. I don't know if I definitively have a favourite driver or drivers right now. I think naturally, the rhetoric will always be to support the people that aren't winning, because you never want to see the same names winning all the time. So you're naturally always going to support the underdog in a lot of situations. So, in more recent times, it's, apologies, but it's just anyone but Max. Not because I have anything against Max, but it's just because, it's nice to see other names to faces win. So, more recently, I've been cheering on the likes of Piastri and Leclerc and people like that who aren't perhaps as often in the spotlight as they could be or should be. If you were to ask me who my favourite kind of driver of all time was, really, we'd have to move entirely away from the F1 paddock and actually look towards something like MotoGP, because that's where a lot of kind of my racing heroes, I would say, were kind of born in. Obviously, you have like big names like Valentino Rossi, which everyone will say, but for me, my favourite was and always will be Marco Simoncelli. I've always a big admirer of, hard attacking racing, last of the late breakers kind of stuff, wild and a little bit crazy as well. I think, that's why I quite liked Romain Grosjean when he first turned up into F1 for his second season, because obviously he was, quote unquote, the first lap nutcase, but I love that thought of someone being such a hard charger and clearly giving their all. And then then kind of sort of going back through F1 history, names like, I love watching a background videos of someone like a Ronnie Peterson or a Tom Price or something like that. These 70s cars which you could put absolutely sideways through the corners, kind of drifting them around like a rally car and then sending them straight on again. I think that's absolutely brilliant to see. I love seeing stuff like that. So anyone who you would kind of put in that class of wild, crazy, sideways action kind of drivers, they're always going to be the ones that I'm going to hold closest to my heart.
I saw the documentary about Ronnie Peterson. From what I can remember, his team wasn't always very nice to him. They favored the other driver that was there. That's what I remember. And then his accident. I think it was a documentary with his daughter there as well. Have you not seen it? No.
I haven't seen it. It's been on my watch list for a while, but I do know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
So yeah, interesting character. My favorites would be people like Lauda, who are completely honest no matter where they are. So saying to the Ferrari mechanic that the car is a shit box. Those kind of things. People grow in my how do you call it? Esteem. People grow in my esteem when they're so cheeky and do their own thing.
Yeah.
We talked about your favorite teams. We talked about your favorite drivers. Do you have a favorite racetrack? Historically or on the current grid?
For me, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, Montreal, is my favourite. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's always been the site of, certainly historically anyway, some really good races, very memorable ones that I can look back on and always remember. There's so many people that have won their first race there, which I think makes it quite special for me. Seeing people like Kubica and Hamilton, Ricciardo, over the years, just winning their first races there makes it quite special for me, because obviously, like I say, I always like seeing someone different and getting that first wins, which is always exciting. It's had, was it 2011 when Jenson Button won the very last lap, getting past Vettel, goes down, I think, as definitely up there as one of my favourite races of all time as well. It's also one of the it might be the only racetrack which I've actually been on. I don't know whether this is still the case, but I was in Canada in 2006, and you used to be able to, you could literally just drive off the motorway and get onto the circuit and you just be on there in your car. And I remember I was with my dad and some family friends, and they let my dad kind of drive around the circuit, and that was kind of a really amazing experience as well, as like I said, just to be actually on the Grand Prix circuit driving all the corners. And we got to like get out and stand on the pit wall and take photos and all this sort of stuff. So it has a very special place in my memory, just for having been kind of the closest I've come to a proper Grand Prix circuit. But like I say, even when I'm a racing game or something like that, I love, especially going into that last chicane and trying to catch it as straight as possible, so you're not hitting that wall of champions and then getting onto the main straight as well. It's a great circuit.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned driving over the circuit. My father used to sell, was a flour wholesaler, and he took a lorry to Germany twice a week. And he was in the south of Germany, so from Holland, you would go through Belgium, through the Ardennes, but also over the track in Spa. Spa-Francorchamps. So yeah, he floored it once, the lorry, to go over the track, and yeah, he probably went like 100 kilometers per hour. But it was kind of exciting when you're 8 years old.
Oh, that's amazing! I love that.
But I never thought I'd go there to watch a race. I actually been twice to Spa.
Amazing.
Didn't end so well for Max, because that's why I went.
Yeah.
I went there in 2017 and 2019. Twice he DNF'd.
Yeah.
So have you been to races?
I've been to one race. So I went to the British Grand Prix in 2009. I remember I think it was a gift from my parents because I'd done well at my GCSEs, or I think it was something like that. They said, we'll treat you, we'll take you to the race. And obviously, typical, that was the year when you had Brawn, you had Button. Like I say, he was my hero when I first started viewing. So I was very excited that having seen him, dominate the first part of the year, we would go and watch him win at home in Silverstone. And of course, he probably did not win any more races, I think from Turkey onwards. But it was, still obviously an amazing experience just being at the track and seeing those cars a lot closer. We were on what was the old start-finish straight, so what is now probably halfway around the track now. I have been to Silverstone since then to watch MotoGP. I think I've been 2 or 3 times, if only just because it's so much more affordable and easier to get into. But yeah, I've again since then not been, and not for want of trying, but obviously it's an expensive hobby, and I think you're conscious a lot of the time as well as you get an amazing atmosphere by being there, but also you see a lot more things just at home, watching it on your TV than you can necessarily see whilst in the grandstand. So it's a give and throw from that. I think obviously we'd definitely love to go see another one again, and something like a Spa is definitely on my bucket list, at least just to see something like Eau Rouge in person. But that's the only one I've done.
If you want to go to Zandvoort next year, then you can crash in my studio.
I appreciate it.
That'll save you a hotel.
Yeah, this is true.
But my wife and I were going on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Amazing.
And we cycle to the train station, and then we hop on a train to Haarlem, and from Haarlem there's a special bus that delivers you right in front of the door of the circuit.
Oh,
it's a 40-minute trip.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
And as soon as you walk out of the track as well, with that long stream of audience people leaving, the buses are sitting ready there to bring you back to the train station.
Brilliant.
It's very well organized, especially compared to Spa, where it's always muddy and you walk about 10 miles before you get to your car again. And I was in Austria last year, and they had it all sorted out as well. You can leave it to the Germans, the Austrians, and the Dutch to organize a race. I'd love to go to Silverstone because that's pretty much the holy grail of Formula One.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's on my wish list, and I'd love to go to Kota in
yes,
the US.
that's a good one. That's definitely become a more recent classic for sure.
Just always good races there, and I think the US is fascinating. The country itself and the lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, the next question. Oh yeah, have you other YouTubers, big ones?
Not in person, no. Obviously, I've done collaborations online. I've been in other podcasts and things like that as well. We have a family friend who certainly used to work at Williams. I don't know whether he still does, but we've been lucky that I've gone to do the tour around the museum there a couple of times, which is, if you're in the UK and you get a chance to do that, I absolutely recommend, because you're getting to see all those old cars in person, which is brilliant.
And that's in Grove.
That's in Grove, yeah. And I believe, so when we went with this guy, it was on a quote-unquote family day where you could take your friends and your family. But basically, he could then sort of show us around the factory as well, so we were to see all kind of like the machining floors and all these up to a certain reasonable level. Obviously, they're not going to show you all the CFD and bits and pieces like that, but to get to see behind the scenes all those other bits and pieces was really cool. So that's as much kind of interaction as I've had really with that other side. Like I say, I've not personally met any other kind of content creators or drivers or anything like that. Like I say, engaged with a few people online podcasting, but that's about as far as I've gone so far. But doing a meetup at some point, that could be quite fun, yeah.
But is it something like is there a driver you'd love to meet, or somebody in F1 that you'd that you have questions for?
Oh, that's a really good question. I I don't think there's anyone I would dislike meeting. And even if I think I spoke to an obscure driver from the mid-2000s who only started 2 races, I think even then I would be really excited and still probably have loads of questions about everything they did. Nowadays, I'm trying to think. If I could sit down and chat with someone right now, I'd love to chat with someone like a James Vowles. Could be really interesting because he's genuinely so passionate and also really articulate with what he says. I don't.
Yeah, it won't be much of a chat.
No, it'd be him talking at me, but I would be listening interestedly. We'll go to the pub or something like that, and then I can just keep drinking and just nodding and smiling while he just explains all the intricacies of Formula One to me. So, there's
he'll go. Do you want a short answer or do you want a long answer?
And I go, long answer, please. I'll fill up my stein. Just.
I'll do the short answer.
Yeah.
15 minutes later. Yeah. But no, I'm very impressed with James Vowles, how he can just orate how it all comes out.
Yeah.
And I do feel that Williams is on the rise with 2 massive proper drivers for next season, and they're not using spreadsheets anymore. They've got a proper computer system. I think they're making steps. Do you agree?
I think there's definitely reasons to be positive. There was obviously a few years where I would kind of go into it going, right, let me just keep 19th and 20th circled on my television because that's where they're going to be all races, where they'll be qualifying, so I don't need to worry about anything else. There is genuine positivity, yeah. I'd love to dream that they're going to have this kind of McLaren-esque rise back up the order from kind of going from the bottom and back to the top. That might be a bit too fanciful, but even if we could just get back to regular point scoring and get on the podium again in better circumstances than at Belgium in 2021, that would constitute a win for me. I think I previously kind of thought that without any kind of sort of major manufacturer involvement, I was dubious as to whether you could kind of make that move to the front, because kind of the best that Williams had recently was when they were partnered with BMW, and ignoring kind of how toxic that relationship was, it was still powerful enough that it pushed them to the front and kept them from falling back. But it certainly seems now that there is more scope that if you are a customer, a la a McLaren or something like that, you can still be successful and you won't be held back by another manufacturer giving precedence to their works team rather than a customer outfit. So there is potential there. Like I said, you said we've got a really good driver lineup for next year. I didn't believe that Carlos Sainz would go there, with the greatest respect in the world, because I looked at the options that were available on the market, and even though admittedly they're not great in terms of Sauber and Alpine, but I thought Williams can potentially be good. I think the hope is there it's going to be kind of like the Martini years again, when if Mercedes get the engine regulations right, then Williams can kind of vault up the order with that, and like I say, being around that mix for consistent point scoring, and that's kind of where they can shine and maybe get the odd podium now and again. But having them both there is going to be really positive. It's going to be really interesting to see how well Albon goes next year, because he's looked really good since coming back to Williams, but he's only being compared alongside Latifi and a Sargent, who, with the greatest will in the world, are not. Well, neither of them are going to be in Formula One next year. So how he gets alongside someone like a Sainz, who is probably a little underrated in a way, in terms of, forget how well he's done at Ferrari and obviously how good he was at McLaren before then. He's a very intelligent and clever, smooth operator, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that battle plays out and how far Williams can move forward. Yeah,
me too. I just want to touch on that Sainz underrated thing. I myself made a video about Sainz being underrated, and a lot of people agreed. And I think if enough people say you're underrated, then you're actually rated right at some point.
Then it balances the other way,
And then the last 4 or 5 races, he's been pretty invisible again. You know, and that's something Sainz seems to have. That he's great. He has these really high peaks, and then he doesn't have massive low points, but he just finishes races in 6th, 7th, 8th, and that's it.
I said at the beginning of the year, and sorry to keep dropping in MotoGP analogies, but I'm not sure whether you even watch the sport at all.
I don't.
But that's fine. But just to quickly compare, so there was a rider on the market last year called Fabio Di Gianantonio, who essentially kind of sleptwalked through about a year and a half of the sport and looked like he was going to be out. And then as soon as it was kind of revealed that actually you're probably going to get replaced, he really kind of sparked into life, and suddenly he was top 5, then he was on the podium, then he won his first race, and it was like, oh, well, now we absolutely have to make sure there is a space for this guy because he's clearly very talented, and he's continued that trend this year as well. And I kind of liken that to Sainz in a way, because we knew early on, obviously, he was going out from Ferrari, and that kind of did seem to light a fire under him. Certainly those first, no, he wasn't in Saudi, but Australia was obviously a very strong race for him as well, and Bahrain he was quite good there as well. So it's whether he could, because he felt he had something to prove, whether he would kind of keep pushing forward and almost be best to the rest. It has then kind of slid back from then, and like you say, it has kind of become more anonymous more recently, and part of that is down to the car. Ferrari's not as good as it was at the start, so it's difficult to say whether it's him or the car that's kind of pushing it back there, but yeah.
We were talking about whether Williams would make it to the top, and the engine playing a big part in that. Do you think we're going towards a time where the engine and the power of the engine is not that important anymore? Like, I think that's already happening since 2014, that the proper manufacturers have pretty much similar strength engines. Do you think for 2026 those regulations will they be more for aero, or will they be?
It's going to be less important. I think the difference you've got in terms of those different regulations. So 2014, we just had 4 engine manufacturers at the time, and it was very clearly Mercedes was the best and Honda were the worst, and then it was kind of a muddle between Ferrari and Renault in between. Going into 2026, we, depending what Renault do, may have 6 different engine manufacturers. So what we've got now, plus you've got Ford lending their support to Red Bull, and obviously got Audi coming in as well. So there's going to be more differences, but just because you've got the best one does not mean that the second best one is not going to be able to beat you at a race weekend. I don't think there's going to be as much of a divide or gap between them. So it's really interesting to try and work out how it's going to work down, because more than maybe whether it's going to be the air or the engines, it's what's going to kind of happen in the remainder of this year in 2025, because it's playing that game of chicken of when do you stop concentrating on this year or next year and then jump to that next one. You look at someone like a McLaren, who are very seriously in the hunt for the constructors this year. Are they willing to put all their resources into trying to make that happen at the expense of potentially 2026 not being as strong? The allegory you can always look at is something like a BMW, who had the opportunity to win the championship in 2008, elected to move their resources to 2009, and obviously it hideously backfired, and they were out of the sport by the end of the year. So it's what the McLaren and Red Bull are the interesting ones. I think Mercedes are definitely pretty much concentrating on 2026, and anything they get as a bonus now is going to fall into place. And then obviously you've got those further back, like a Sauber / Audi, maybe an Alpine as well, who are kind of go, right, let's move all that into there because we're not going to make a jump now, so let's focus on that point there. So I'm pretty sure I didn't really answer your question about whether it's going to be aero or engines. I think engines is going to be, obviously it's going to have some impact, but like I say, it is a lot more closely matched now than it ever was. More manufacturers in 2026. It's going to keep that field, I think, quite closely bunched up. So it may, I think then it just comes down to who gets the error right and who works out what best to do.
So in a sense of, people putting their focus on the next regulations, that happened in 2021 as well. And seeing that Red Bull and Mercedes both fought till the end, it's quite impressive how, especially Red Bull came out in the new season and they only overspend a little bit to get there.
Yeah, and then that's going to probably. I know we've not talked. I know you've not said anything about it, but it definitely plays on that kind of what's Max Verstappen's next kind of move going to be? Is he going to stick at Red Bull? Is this Mercedes thing going to come to anything at all? The fact that Red Bull have proven that they can pour their resources into getting a championship and then still come out the next year swinging just as strong. That's got to be a really kind of big incentive for him to be looking at that, whereas opposed to a Mercedes who definitely haven't got it right. And if we're thinking that the engines aren't going to be as huge a leap forward as it might do, then that's going to play into his mind as well.
Yeah. How much credit would you give Newey for what they showed up with in 2022, Red Bull?
You've got to put a huge amount of credit into what that man does. He is... I mean, he must be probably the greatest kind of designer that we've had in history. I think it can be overstated maybe a little bit more recently what he's done, because he is the designer, but there are a lot of people involved in that department as well. So it's not as if everything he says goes and everything he makes kind of comes forward. You have to respect that Newey as well for a long time was kind of more chaotic with his successes as well, particularly when he was at McLaren as well. He was very good at making fast cars, but they were also kind of chronically unreliable as well. So while he's always been brilliant, it's not always kind of balanced that edge between brilliance or bust for him. So clearly he's done a good job, and it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes next and what impact that's going to have. Like I say, because he balances that edge, I don't think just because he moves to whether it's Ferrari or Aston Martin, which looks like the most kind of viable options, they're not going to be brilliant from day one, even with him there, because it's going to take time to bed in and work out the right processes for him there and how that's going to kind of all streamline and adapt into that new working environment. And by the same stroke, Red Bull are going to struggle a bit, and they are kind of a little bit imploding right now in terms of everything that's kind of jumping ship and happening within there, but they're not going to go from where they are to 20 seconds of the pace at the back of the grid. It's going to make an impact, but it's not going to be maybe as huge as some people fear.
No, see, I think that Red Bull had brilliant people working there, and they designed a good car, and with Newey overseeing things, I think he was the type of person that would go, okay, what you've done now, that's great, but maybe do this a little bit more like that, or maybe you need to look into balancing this bit a little bit out more, and then he would set people to do the proper jobs. And I feel that at the minute that's what's missing with Red Bull. They have these problems with riding the curbs and like small issues that maybe the vision of somebody that oversees these things, with the talent that Newey has, would have come to solutions quicker. That's my idea on it. But do you agree? Or
no, I would agree with that absolutely. I think he's got that kind of guiding hand, and he knows by this point in time he knows what's right or what's wrong when something comes out. Especially having been at Red Bull, he can see how all those processes work. He knows the people that are there and who best suits what kind of roles and stuff. So like you said, he can be very good at delegating in a way in terms of figuring out who should tackle each individual part and how that kind of streamlines the process. Like you say, all he's kind of doing is I'm sure they're producing something still really good, and all he's doing is just kind of polishing it a little bit and tweaking it here and there. But that's still a big impact, and that's there's an old proverb that says if you have a Formula One car that's working at 99.99% capacity, that still leaves 100 things that can go wrong in there. That's how kind of complex they are. And you can say the same thing with Newey as well. You say, oh, well, if he's only just applying those final touches, you're only getting rid of that, 0.1% of whatever it is that he's contributing to the design maybe. But again, that's still going to be a huge number of tenths just within that kind of contribution alone.
Yeah. So it'd be very interesting to see that for the rest of the season. So talking about current F1, do you have your likes and dislikes there? I know you don't want Max to win too many races this season. I'm different in that way because I'm a Dutch Max fan.
Yeah, of course.
And I'd love to see him win the rest of the season. Well, he can leave the last two for someone else.
Yeah.
So who are your likes and dislikes on the current grid?
So I think it's not necessarily a dislike of Max. I don't hate the guy. I think it was a struggle for me from an entertainment perspective last year, because if you know, like I say, I working on either this mobile chicane or working on my other job, so you get 2 days off a week, and if one of those days is spent watching a Grand Prix, and you probably get 2 hours of nothing happening other than one guy winning by more closer to a month than measured in minutes, then that's, it's hard. And I've said before that on the occasions where maybe I couldn't watch a race live, say it was like in Japan or something, I was watching the highlights, and let's say we get to lap 20 and Max was way out front and nothing was happening, I would go and have a look at the results online, just to more kind of say, is anything going to happen, within the next hour of my life, or shall I just turn this off and put on a film or something like that instead, so I can use my time properly. But it was a struggle. But I think I've tried to have the mentality of you can only appreciate that stuff happening in front of you. There was a little bit of me that, as boring as it would have been, I would have liked to see Red Bull win every single race last year, if only just because of the history of it. It's very difficult when you're living in it, but when you look back retrospectively, you go, "Oh, that was a crazy achievement," and we watched that, we saw that happen. And I've had that with the Schumacher years, the Vettel years, the Hamilton years, which at the time maybe seemed a little bit more boring and predictable, but then you look back on it now and go, "Oh, that was a silly accomplishment." Like Vettel, when he first won, he set the record for consecutive races won. That was something we lived through and got to see. So that's something you have to admire, whether or not it's the most exciting result. It's something you have to kind of appreciate.
And I feel that a lot of people look at that list of results and they see Max winning 10 in a row and 19 in a whole season, and you forget all the individual races. Yeah. So I watched a season review of the 2023 season, and that gave me inspiration to make a video called 3 races that Max Verstappen should not have won in 2023. And that included Monaco, because if Aston Martin had put him on the right tires, Alonso, then Alonso would have won. Kota, that was almost Lewis Hamilton who won. Then I think he got disqualified, so maybe that's not the best example. But anyway, there were 3 races where, like, the circumstances and Max Verstappen, putting out that strategy that was given to him to a T, that made him win those 3 races that shouldn't have been won by him. But you see, if you see him winning 19 races, then you forget about those 3 remarkable races that he didn't, that he almost didn't win. They weren't as straightforward as people like to think now, and that's what keeps me watching.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And so to circle back to your original question of kind of likes and dislikes for this coming year, if I had to pick a favourite, it would maybe be someone like an Oscar Piastri. I think I've been really impressed with him since he's come in. I think not just because of what he's doing now, that he's got a fast car, but I think what really kind of impressed me was when he got that McLaren update last year. I think it was at Silverstone, I may be misremembering. But when he got it and he was going from fighting for 17th, 16th place to being in a position where he could fight for podiums, and he wasn't flustered. I think that's what really impressed me, was that a lot of times you see these drivers, they get that rare opportunity to kind of jump up to the front and maybe get a podium or something like that, and it's a lot of pressure and it can kind of all fall away. There's so many instances in the past of drivers doing that and cracking under that pressure, and he just was cool as a cucumber as soon as that kind of first happened. And there's been a few little bit more errors this year in kind of sort of pit strategies and his time management and things like that as well, but he still really impresses me. He's still a really good talent. And you forget that this is only his 2nd year as well. It feels like he's been around a lot longer. And the fact that he's now pushing Lando quite close, and I think I do still quite rate Lando, I know he doesn't have all the fans in the world, but I still think he's a decent little talent. The fact that they are now kind of getting towards loggerheads with each other, I think is going to be really interesting. Friends of the podcast, I was recently listening to the Blatantly Biased Racing podcast, and they were talking about kind of their predictions for 2026, and I think working out kind of the driver market for that as well. And I think, yes, in 1% Norris and Piastri are locked down there, but if this trend keeps continuing where McLaren are getting faster and faster and becoming more of a threat, and they are starting to fight for wins every other weekend, and we've already kind of seen, the scenes at Hungary this year as well, there is every chance that is kind of heading towards a Hamilton-Rosberg-esque kind of implosion as well, which, I mean, you want to see for the drama, but it's going to be interesting to see. So, yeah, for me this year, I'm going to be cheering on McLaren for the remainder of the year. I'd love to see them get the constructors, because I think 1998 was the last time they won it, which is a crazy sense when they had, obviously, they've had Hakkinen and Hamilton years in between that as well. And I can't see anyone other than Max winning it, just because, I mean, the epitome was that in Belgium where Max started so far back and yet still finished ahead of Norris. That was kind of the opportunity to maybe start chipping away points. That's the only way it's really going to happen, is if that McLaren can consistently chip away at those points. But with the amount of mistakes that they've made so far, I think they've probably left, even if they have a much better second half of this year, I think it's still a little bit too much. But that said, there's now a genuine interest. I think the last time I did a race review podcast was maybe like around Miami time or something like that. And I was sort of saying, it's going to be a Verstappen domination for the rest of the year, but let's watch behind and see if anything interesting happens. And now it is all interesting happening, because McLaren make that leap forward. Mercedes are, to be talking about Mercedes as 3-time Grand Prix winners before going into the summer break is not something any of us predicted before the season started. Can Ferrari kind of get it together again, or is there going to be someone like an Aston or something like that has a really big, exciting race weekend or something like that? So there's a lot of threads to be following. It's quite exciting coming into this final part, even if we sort of already know who the driver's champion is going to be.
Yeah, a lot needs to happen for Max to not win the championship. Like a lot of DNFs or something, or a big injury that he misses a few races. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Of course. Yeah.
So you want to look forward to Zandvoort? What are your expectations? Do you think it's going to be a Mercedes win, or? I personally think that the Red Bulls are not going to be all that strong there.
It's difficult to say. So Red Bull are at their weakest point. I think this is the longest kind of winless Verstappen streak we've had since maybe 2020, 2019 or something like that. So there's definitely a struggle there. He doesn't have any kind of rear gunner with him as well, which is not going to be helpful. On pure pace, on average, you've got to say McLaren is probably the fastest car out there. If Red Bull can get it in the sweet spot that it works best as, then Red Bull is the best car. But it seems that fine-tuning that is being a real problem recently, which makes it kind of even more impressive this season than Max is happening, because he's so often kind of maybe going above and beyond what that car can maybe be capable of. It's very difficult to get a perspective of where that car belongs, because he's being so brilliant and Sergio is being so ordinary with it as well. So if I was to make a prediction this weekend, I'd probably put my money more towards Max. I think he really likes the circuit and he's had a car advantage before, but I think having that home expectation is something that kind of really G's him along, and it's worth those sort of extra couple of tenths a lap or so. So, and I'm not sure whether this kind of circuit is going to suit McLaren too well as well either. So it's whether, like I say, it's whether Mercedes put a cat amongst the pigeons, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a Russell or Hamilton win, and I love the narratives of every race, every situation. First time winner, or somebody winning a race for the 9th time, like Lewis Hamilton in Silverstone. But it would kind of be sort of a bit of karma for Lewis Hamilton to win Max's home race.
Yeah, very true.
I could kind of go for that. I'll not be too sour about it. if that happens. Unless he's put Max in the wall, then
yeah, by all means.
Then I'll not be happy.
Yeah, well, I don't know how he's getting out of the circuit if that does happen.
No, it'll be all right. Yeah. So, what are your highlights of this season so far? Is it like Oscar's win? Or?
We've had, if you were making like a little dream list before the season started and you were taking stuff off, we've had a lot of good things happen. Like you said, we had Oscar's first win, we had Lando's first win, Leclerc winning at Monaco. As I think I tweeted at the time, I think the race did make me want to kind of remove both of my eyeballs and throw them at the wall. But just for that emotion, that pure emotion at the end when he realised he'd finally done it and he was celebrating on the podium, that was really good. Lewis kind of breaking his winless streak at Silverstone, that was incredible as well. I think all we're really missing is probably an Alonso win. That would be good, just to, again, it must be like 10 years now or so since he's last done it. And then if we get a Hulkenberg podium as well, and then I think if you're making a little bingo card, before you choose scenarios, that's everything done. So, but yeah, it's very hard to pick a highlight. Probably out of all of those, I'm gonna say probably a Hamilton's win, if only because I remember kind of how nervous I was watching it. And I'm sure if my partner was in the room, she would be agreeing with me that I had my head in my hands and I had like the Christian Horner like leg jiggle kind of going as well, just desperately hoping that Max wouldn't catch him by the end. So, that for me, that was brilliant to see.
Yeah. No, those were good vibes. What I've learned over the last year is not to invest too much in one team and one driver. Just try to enjoy the whole spectrum of the sport, because you get let down by teams at certain times. Do you get what I'm getting at here?
I get what you're saying, but also I highly recommend being a Williams fan because I have no expectations any weekend.
No, but
if at any point we're in the top 10, that's
historically.
Historically,
Williams, there have been bad things happening there as well.
Yeah.
Like Frank Williams sacking every world champion he had driving for him, or Claire and Frank Williams hanging on to Williams even though it wasn't the right choice, and then seeing them drop off to very, very last place. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you started being a Williams fan in their glory days and you put all your hopes in them, you'd be disappointed at some point.
Absolutely. No,
and I started watching Formula 1 in 2015 when Max joined Toro Rosso, and I thought it was awesome that there was that there were two teams on the grid owned by an energy drink company. They didn't care about money. They didn't care about kicking drivers out to put another driver in. They were putting in their own youngsters. The team was awesome. The only problem they had in those years is that they didn't have a proper engine, and Ferrari and Mercedes didn't want to supply them with a proper engine. So it took years before they got the Honda engines, and then something started growing. And it was brilliant for me as a Dutch Max fan to see all that develop to dominance. But now I'm seeing it crumbling apart, pretty much. And so now I've learned not to be completely focused on one team.
Yeah.
Because Red Bull is not a fun team at the minute. And my respect for a team like Mercedes is growing. Mm-hmm. And Ferrari has always been magical, even with their clownery all the time. Yeah. McLaren is an awesome team, but they had a bit of history with a bit of negative history as well. With was it Spygate? Yeah. So yeah, like the only team without any bad history is Aston Martin, but they've only been on the grid for a short while. So,
yeah. And then you've only got to kind of rewind a few years to when it was Force India and maybe some of the things that have happened around.
Well, that's true.
PJ Malia, so it lasts.
That was Force India. Yeah. they went bankrupt pretty much.
Yeah.
And then they copied Mercedes' car.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
So there you go. You can't trust any of them.
Oh, and they continue to bankroll the career of Lance Stroll, who isn't terrible, but there's his own kind of problems around that.
I'm actually a big Lance Stroll fan, so
I think he's decent. And I think he's better than people give credit for. I think the issue, and maybe a lot of people have, is that let's say we're kind of statistically marking down all the teams, and so let's say that if you're Red Bull and you're the best team, you should have the best 2 drivers, and cycle that down to McLaren, you have the 3rd and 4th best, and so on and so forth. And if you have Aston Martin sitting at that kind of 5th level, they should have the 9th and 10th best drivers. And I don't think Lance Stroll is in that kind of... If you put all those drivers in a ranking list, he's not in the top 10. With the greatest respect to him, I think when he had that season at Racing Point, when it was that kind of Mercedes copy, he was quite strong there. And I maintain, he was really unlucky not to win a race that year, just because of the way that the tyres kind of reacted when they were at Turkey. So he absolutely does kind of warrant a seat on the grid because he's had a pole, he's had podiums, he can score points, but it's whether he's taking the seat of someone who should be in that kind of top 10 spectrum, and whether he should be maybe a little lower down the field.
But you see the enthusiasm that someone like Daniel Ricciardo has. And people find him annoying because he's always funny and making jokes and stuff. Yeah. Well, the other end of the spectrum is Lance Stroll, who's always bored.
Yeah.
And he comes across as one of those spoiled kids that have a Maserati and a Ferrari and all these sports cars in the garage and and that's, I think, his whole attitude is the biggest problem. If we see him goofing around and laughing with the other drivers and being enthusiastic in interviews, people would have behaved a lot different. But
No, I think that's an absolutely valid point. I think if you gave Lance Stroll the personality of Daniel Ricciardo, that's not a nice thing to say someone's not the
No,
but
Daniel
to
Ricciardo,
have that more kind of bubbly kind of pop to him, I think maybe people might be more.
Daniel Ricciardo
anyway.
needs to tone down a bit.
Okay, so somewhere in the middle you're looking.
And then Lance Stroll needs to go up a bit, and then you have 2 solid, boring drivers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Lance Stroll. Every podcast we talk about Lance Stroll.
Yeah, I will say I've always been of the case that I don't buy into the fact that his seat there is safe for the next 20 years or so. I think just because his dad owns the team does not constitute that, because I think I've always kind of said that Lawrence Stroll is, he's a billionaire. He is a ruthless businessman. It's as nice as it would be to have your son, win races and be world champion. If he has the opportunity to sign, Max Verstappen and, Oscar Piastri tomorrow, he's absolutely going to take that. So for me, it's not a guarantee. It will always be a preference, but he understands that you should understand that to make a successful model, that's not going to work.
Well, see, I approached it from another angle a while ago in one of my videos, that F1 is still a dangerous sport, and the chances are that he'll crash someday and get injured in a bad way. And do you want to put him through all that risk without getting all these results?
Yeah.
And then another thing is if that he's always in a bad mood when he's on the track, or around the track, then why put yourself through that? Because sometimes he gives off the vibe where that he doesn't even want to be there himself anymore. And if that's the case, then he definitely needs to go. And that's all besides him having the talent or not.
Yeah, of course. And you really hope that's not the case, because obviously one of the biggest problems you've got with F1 now is that there's only 20 seats on the grid, and there is so much talent that we are not getting to see because there's just not the space for it. And obviously coming into the season, we didn't have any changes at all.
So who would you like to see go then next season? K-Mag is pretty much done. Valtteri Bottas, do you think he's gone?
I can't work out what's going to happen with Bottas. It's going to come down to what Audi wants. And to put a historical spin on it in a way, I wonder whether this is going to be and again, harking back to one of my videos, when McLaren and Mercedes first joined together, and they needed a second driver for that car to go alongside Mika Hakkinen, and McLaren and Mercedes, they wanted kind of a safe pair of hands. They wanted someone a little bit low key, so they were looking at Christian Fittipaldi. But sponsors Marlboro were like, no, we've got to make a big signing, we've got to make a big statement, and they pushed for Nigel Mansell there, which goes to my channel to see how badly that ended. But Audi has kind of had everything thrown back in its face a bit. The beginning, if we cycle back 8 months to the beginning of the year, and you were to ask me who's going to Audi for next year, I would have said 100% Carlos Sainz is going there. Because even if it's, Sauber's not as competitive as it should be right now, but it's got a prestige about it with Audi. It's got, a history of success in other categories, and also it's going to offer a very, very big pay packet as well, which, like it or not, is always going to kind of be a big, factor for a lot of people. And it speaks volumes of how far back Sauber are right now, that Sainz has then actually gone, not even touching that. And so many other people as well, like an Esteban Ocon has gone, no, I'm not going to go to Audi, but I am going to go to Haas. Which, if you say that in any other context, is a crazy thing to be saying. I think a lot of people want to kind of compare that Audi situation to something like when BMW came in, because obviously it's the same team that they're taking over, and BMW took over something, put it into the midfield, then into podiums, and then into wins. But from where Audi are right now, they are starting so far back from where that Sauber currently is, and they have that less. They don't have a history in Formula One, so there's no kind of way of knowing what, if the engines are a factor, whether Audi is going to be the best engine, and surely it won't be because it's their first engine. That would be incredible if it was anything better than the fifth or sixth best engine at the time. So I wonder whether they're going to if they want that safe pair of hands, then Bottas is the sensible choice. And Bottas knows that's probably going to be the only way he's staying on the grid, so he will take any contract they kind of throw at him. But I've heard reports recently about Gabriel Bortoletto's been linked there. There's been Alex Palau has been linked there, which would be absolutely nuts, And if they do want that kind of big, eye-catching signing, then something like that would absolutely do it. I know some people have talked about Sebastian Vettel. I can't personally see that one happening. It comes down to whether they want safe hands or they want something eye-catching. The chaotic part of me wants it to be eye-catching. I'd love to see a Palau or a Bortoletto in there, but if they're going to be sensible, they should take Bottas.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for Valtteri that he can stay for another year, because 2025 is a filler year anyway.
Yeah. So going back to what you're saying, I think Magnussen's gone. With that, I think Zhou is going as well.
Zhou's gone.
And
but then
Sargent as well is kind of falls in. I think that's three.
I've read articles about Zhou maybe going to Alpine, and the $30 million he brings with him are going to be used to buy Mercedes engines.
Definitely could be. Yeah,
that's something I've read.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Alpine. I think I'm still of the mindset that we're heading towards a sale there. I think the fact that Briatore is making a lot of noise for someone who isn't the team principal there. He's just in some sort of consulting role, and yet he seems to be always kind of involved in every kind of statement that's coming out of there. I think the fact that you've got Oliver Oakes coming in there of High Tech, I think is really interesting, because High Tech were one of those teams trying to get onto the grids before and didn't get their application pulled through. So whether I can fully see this being kind of a High Tech takeover there, and especially with the news that maybe, well, it's looking very likely that Renault are going to stop making engines as well. They're going to get Custer in there. Everything about that feels like they're just about to head into transition or some sort of sale, regardless of what they're saying at the top there. That's just how it's feeling to me.
Yeah. But then, that money that Joe brings, and having another that Chinese driver still on the grid for another year, that would work well for Formula One, and it would work well for the Alpine team as well.
Agreed.
Until they say goodbye to it.
Yeah, I think I said the same kind of around China as well, when you saw him kind of pull up in front of the fans and how crazy they were going for him, even though he just finished 15th, whatever it was. I was thinking, is that going to be maybe a factor in place? Because clearly that's a huge market he can have sway over, and whether he's kind of
like for the sport itself, I don't think there's much flavor on Joe. If we talk about Joe's highlights in his career, then I remember a wobble in the tunnel in Monaco, where he said, "Oh, I've got brown pants now," or something like that. And his accident at Silverstone.
Yeah.
But then George Russell took he stole the thunder by climbing out of his car and pretending he was a medic or something.
Yeah.
But those are the two only highlights that I can remember off the top of my head of
I think wasn't
Joe.
Wasn't he running second at Zandvoort? Was it last year or maybe the year before that? I think in the chaos, it was when it was definitely in wet conditions. It wasn't on the face. I do seem to recall him running up there, and obviously it turned into nothing. But on results alone, we've not seen anything. It's been 3 years now, and you kind of have to say, right, that's enough of that. Let's put some of this fresh, new talent in. For me, I think that Alpine seat's going to Doohan. That seems to be all the noise that's being made there, just because it makes the easiest, most logistical sense as well.
Yeah. He's a nice, cool guy as well, because I always watch F1 TV, and he's a co-host there most of the time. And he's not afraid to ask the tricky questions, and then if people ask him a tricky question, then he always knows his way around it. He's very well media trained.
Yeah.
So I think we've handled the expectations for this season and the next, unless there's something that pops up that you want to talk about.
No, I think we've covered it pretty well on that one.
Yeah. Crazy prediction? A wild prediction for this season?
I already predicted a Piastri win, so I'm going to say that the rest of that bingo card gets filled out. I think we're going to get an Alonso win and a Hülkenberg podium. I think one of those is crazy enough by itself. I think to get both of them in these last 10 races. So that's what I'm going to be hoping to see.
I'll pick one, and you pick the other one then. So
okay.
Which one are you saying?
Oh, I think I'll have the Alonso win, I think.
Okay. So is that going to be his 33rd win or his 32nd?
33rd, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Unless you don't count the 32nd one, because it was a fraud. And the Hülkenberg podium. Does a sprint race count?
Sprint races shouldn't count for anything. Really. Sprint races shouldn't even be
there. I can see him, in a wet quali, put it on P3 or 4, and then in a sprint race, short distance, maybe also wet.
Yeah.
Keep in the position and. But no, it shouldn't count. It would be awesome though. I think there's
awesome.
a lot.
That would be so unfortunate though if the only podium he ever gets is in a sprint race.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like it counts.
But I mean, K-Mag has one pole, and that was a sprint pole as well, and people still count that as well. So
yeah, true.
I think if you're in his position, you'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your channel before we say goodbye. Where can we find you?
You can find me at the Mobile Chicane on YouTube, and various iterations of that on social media as well, because some crafty bugger already took the Mobile Chicane on half of them anyway. So easiest thing to do is go to my channel, Mobile Chicane, and you can find all my socials, all my links on there. I tend to try and upload every 5 to 6 weeks. It's not a consistent schedule at all, just because of, like I said, it's a part-time basis, and also, these videos are now getting to over an hour long each time as well, which takes a long old time to be writing and editing and recording. But rest assured, I'm churning out stuff as fast as I can at the time being, and if this ever becomes a full-time gig, then it might be even faster than that.
Yeah. Okay, so people, if you like really long, in-depth videos about Formula 1, all presented in a lovely, soft-spoken voice that Mr. Chicane has here, then go ahead and subscribe to his YouTube channel. For the people that are watching this podcast or listening to it on Spotify through the Mobile Chicane's channels, please subscribe to my channel as well. My videos are a little bit shorter. I like to keep them around the 8-9 minutes mark. I'm a little bit more edgy, and I'm totally biased for Max Verstappen, and I'll probably will stay that way until he retires, which is not going to be too long, if rumors are to be believed, or if we go by what he says. And thank you all for watching and listening, and I'll see you all in the next one. Doei doei!